Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee for Capital Expenditures. Today is Wednesday, October 26, 2022. This evening's meeting, first I just want to recap from last week's meeting. You recall we went over a general overview of the revised or the updated capital needs inventory for the city. And as you recall, for those members who were here last year, it's divided into various categories based on services from various city departments. And so we were going to go about bringing in some of those departments over the next several weeks to discuss some of those projects and into further detail. We had been talking about bringing in streets first, although we had to sort of juggle the schedule a little bit. So tonight, we do have Parks, Recreation, and Forestry first to go over some of those projects, and then we hope to have streets in here next week. So with that, and just some housekeeping, again, as we go through the process, if you have questions, you can use the chat, and I can get back to that. Of course, I'm going to be sharing screens, so it's sometimes jumping back and forth, difficult for me to get there. So what we'll do is present, go through the sharing screen of all that, and then if we miss something, go back to the chats with any outstanding questions. So with that, I would like to first of all introduce Greg Hayes, who is the director from the Department of Recreation and Forestry, and he is here also with Kimberly Hagley, who is the Parks Division Commissioner. I'm going to share the screen just to refresh your memory of the capital needs inventory. If I can pull that up. Let's see here. Which has, okay, I don't know why it's not coming up here. Share screen. Oh, here we go. Which you should all see on screen right now, hopefully. And with that, and you can see what the needs are for Parks, Recreation, and Forestry under those various categories. So with that, I'll leave it up to Greg if you wanted to get going and discuss what the capital needs for parks are.
I appreciate that, Paul. On the screen in front, as Paul said, I have Kim Hagley, Commissioner of Parks here. We're both housed at 5600 Clayton Avenue here in Forest Park. And just so everyone knows, we're the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. That is correct. But Brightside, St. Louis, and Soulard Market also fall under our umbrella or purview, if you will. So essentially, if we're talking about 1, 2, 3, and 4, which I believe is the conversation tonight, you're talking about ballpark figure of 20 million for the park maintenance building renovations, which we'll discuss here with some pictures, boiler replacements, pool renovations, and then the 7 million for Soulard Market renovations, which of course we have some details and some pictures to show you the needs that we contend are definite needs. Going back to the pools, just in case you don't know, we have 4 indoor pools and 3 outdoor pools that are managed by city staff, and that's the City Recreation Division with their staffing. So if you put all that together, you're looking at about $26 million, if you will, including the Soulard. So Paul, if we could dive into, thank you. So yeah, I'll touch upon what you have in front of you there. We're talking about 10 park maintenance yards that are under the direct supervision of Kim Hagley. These park yards are responsible, each one is responsible with staff for more than one park, obviously. We try to get as many contiguous parks geographically under the supervision of one of those maintenance yards. And I won't go over all the details, but you can see the staff that is there. Essentially, that's a general description of the staff. And those 10 park yards are citywide. And as Kim and Paul have them on the list there. So maybe scroll down a little bit. You can get a picture of where we're talking about. I'm going to hit the highlights. Paul, if you want to scroll down a little further, I'm going to hit the highlights of what we're talking about in general at these locations before we dive into some pictures, which I think are very descriptive pictures. The fences at many, and I'm not saying this is the exact situation at every yard, but these problems are pretty prevalent across the 10 yards. A lot of these buildings haven't been touched with any maintenance dollars going to them for many years. So we're talking about fences, the fences that secure our yards where we keep equipment, parks, vehicles, etc. We've had some issues with criminal theft and property damage. So we've actually had to shuttle folks and staff from different locations, which is extremely inefficient, just to make sure we're not giving folks the opportunity. But we have fences that are rusted at our park yards, and not being able to secure the sites at several of these yards, many of these yards, is very problematic for us. So we're looking for more secure locations with perimeter fencing and any of the fencing that's at these yards. We house equipment and supplies at these yards. So we have overhead doors that it's very difficult to even shut them, let alone secure them. And with roof issues, with water damage, obviously water running below these doors, you have rotting doors and doors that are just in really bad shape. I just touched upon the roofs. Roofs are certainly an issue. We could lose some of these buildings if in fact they don't get some attention, which is what these funds are intended to do, is address these issues. As you can see, we noted, the shelf life or longevity of a roof, and these far exceed the shelf life of a normal roof. Gutter, just touching the basics to wrap this up. Gutters and downspouts. We have a lot of running water going right down these park maintenance yard buildings. Very problematic. If you could just picture that being at your own home, a lot of these buildings could be completely tuck pointed, or a vast majority of it needing tuck pointing. Exterior doors and windows are problematic, and bathrooms. So we also call them comfort stations. But when you think about it, when you report to work every day, I think most of us, if not all of us, are fortunate to have the basic necessities where we can use a restroom facility, a serviceable water fountain. If some folks would go into some of these restrooms, I think, I don't want to be dramatic, but I think the word appalled would come to mind. Our staff are housed in these buildings. They clock in, clock out, if you will. And some of these bathrooms are in really bad shape. I believe Kim and I, by the way, will go back and forth with some Q&A here, obviously answer the chat questions. But some of these bathrooms, well, there's one that I believe at Reservoir, we didn't even have running water. So the folks that worked there had to go get water bottles at a gas station or convenience store. And that's completely unacceptable. And a lot of these maintenance issues we're in serious need. And finally, just asphalt and concrete drives. Our crews report, they go all over the city, but at these maintenance yards, just coming back in, they're basically getting banged around, just driving our service trucks or what have you, or a grass maintenance equipment, just getting to and from the sites. And I'd say those are less of a problem, but other folks that drive on them every day might say they're not less of a problem. We need new asphalt concrete drives. And Kim highlighted O'Fallon. She knows that very well. Now we can get into some of we can scroll a little bit. Thank you, Paul, for doing the slides and helpful. These are some of the buildings. If you don't know, we do have a Parks Downtown crew that is housed at the Forestry Building. That's at 1415 North 13th Street, north of City Hall, if you will, several blocks. And this just touches upon the various parks that are within the purview of that parks maintenance building. So we can just fly through those, but go through those, and you can see if you have any questions. Those are how we've mapped them out geographically, contiguously, if you will. And someone could say, why isn't this park under this one? It's not arbitrary. We feel we have a pretty good mix of what parks report to that yard. And of course, as it's noted, very important to note that Parks handles police, fire headquarters, EMS, medians and cul-de-sacs. We maintain all that. And we also do snow removal on police stations and fire department locations as well. We have a lot of what I call dislocated locations. Streets does the vast majority of snow call, emergency snow call, as you know, but Parks and Forestry are involved in it as well. So if we could get into some of the pictures. And these, as I said, these funds would be huge for us and unprecedented. Here's some pictures I'll go through fairly quickly. Kim, is there anything, not that you have to weigh in now, is there anything I've missed with the intro here before we go through the pictures?
The only other thing that I would add, Greg, is that all of them except for Forest Park basically sit in neighborhoods on streets directly across the street from homes. So, you know, we expect our citizens to keep their property up, but yet they have to look at some of the stuff that, and you'll see better from some of these pictures, what they're looking at across the street from their homes.
Absolutely. Thank you for that input. Here's just a picture of Carondelet, a roof leak, soffit failing, rotten doors. If any of you are pickleball or tennis enthusiasts, this is down there at Loughborough, and when you take Grand into the park, if you will, excuse me, Loughborough Holly Hills, if you will, right off of Loughborough. I've been in that building numerous times over the years, and I've actually stood in an office talking to a staff member and have water dripping on me, so you have to talk to the individual somewhere else in that building. So I think it's a terrific building, just needs a lot of help. Rotting doors, very problematic, and quite frankly and candidly embarrassing. Our crews, we're not looking for opulence or just true beauty. We're just looking for functional facilities, and rotting doors, I would not contend, are functioning facilities. They're problematic for us, and they don't look good to the public, as Kim alluded to. Just some urinal and some toilet issues. I'm not blaming everything on theft and property damage, but sometimes we complete a brand new project and all the copper stolen. We just had North Riverfront Park. Everything in both the men's and women's restrooms were stolen. So, but just looking back at that picture, I think we can fairly agree that needs help and that needs some renovation.
Yeah, that's actually within the park building itself. So that's what staff use every day.
Right.
To go to the bathroom.
And the urinal's out of service now, correct? Okay. Yeah, so that's our parks supervisors, downtown crew that handle Pelker, Kaufman, all the parks, Keener. That's it within that building in forestry. They're appreciative of the space, but it certainly needs some help. That's on the north end of that building inside forestry. That could probably be torn out and redone. Fairgrounds, you can see we have water that gets through there. The bottoms of the doors are blown out. This may be minor to some folks, but these are just some pictures of many problems at these buildings.
The issue with the doors is when they reached this state, and Fairgrounds was just broken into, they were able to force their way in because of the rotting doors. And from the picture above, it has the doors, but then it has chain link gates over the top of it, and that orange gate that you see there. And so the doors close and then the gates close over the top of it, and they were still able to get in. And
Right.
They took all of the, when they got inside, the weed whackers and chainsaws and things like that were in a locked gate that they were able to also get into.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just saw something in the chat. I didn't see the first one. About some of these items. I'm just jumping right into some of these items were there last year, and that individual is correct. And so we can get back to that question, but some of these pictures may look familiar to you. Not a lot's changed Some are new, some are from last year. Not a lot's changed at these buildings, obviously, when it hadn't changed for 30, 40 years. So there's a door in Forest Park. We can probably move a little quicker here. That's type of, yeah, that's the fencing at Marquette. I would say definitely substandard. Marquette. Kim, you have grave concerns about Marquette with the roof and the gutters and such, correct?
Yeah, the problem is the roof, with the roof and the fascia and not having gutters, it's infiltrating into the actual structure of the roof. So it's imperative that the roofs get replaced so that we don't get any structural damage to the building.
Right, thank you. There's the wood frames we've discussed. Structural cracks in the building itself, right? Okay. There's O'Fallon I mentioned, like I said, that's not, we're not going over the road here. We shouldn't be, but you know, you don't want to bang up trucks or equipment. So minor, maybe to some, but definitely needs work there to make that park yard look more presentable and drivable.
The problem is too that in that park yard, the water collects something fierce, so that becomes a big pool.
Right. And Kim and I and Rich Bradley actually Paul, I don't want to tell their secrets, but we all did a volunteer cleanup at O'Fallon Park on a Saturday morning with a lot of folks from the city government, if you will. And we did that. We got rained out pretty good, but we all went in there to group up and get our safety vests. And I think everyone that attended that volunteer cleanup effort in O'Fallon got a good grasp of the inside of that building and how much work it needs internally and externally, major work. This gives you an idea of what our crew has to work in. Now, somebody could say, wow, that looks pretty messy and sloppy but it is a work area. But a lot of times they're moving things just to keep them from getting completely soaked or saturated. So they're moving supplies. It's almost like musical chairs moving things just to keep things dry and out of the way. So it does look like that. There's Reservoir. Kim, you want to touch on Reservoir if you have anything on that?
Just that Reservoir has, as long as I've been here, and I don't know how long prior, has never had a bathroom or running water. So during the summer, they have to leave site during any time they have to leave site to go to the bathroom. And they, like I said, they bring in their own water if they're going to make coffee or, you know, just drinking water, you know, so hand washing becomes an issue. So it's just something that, you know, as a manager, they deserve better than that. Again, Greg mentioned, I don't want the Taj Mahal. I just want someplace where they can go and, you know, it's dirty, it's ugly, but they're in there every day with, you know, they're dirty and sweaty and, you know, just give them the basics and just make sure that it's, you know, structurally sound and they're not being rained on when they're inside, those sorts of things.
Yep, right. Great points. And like all city agencies, all our colleagues, you know, I would say we're all proud of the services we perform to the best of our ability. So it would certainly be nice to have the staff be able to be more proud of the buildings and facilities they work in. I think it's the least we can do. And plus it makes it safer for them. There's Sherman Park, which is, as you know, adjacent to Wool Rec Center. And that is on the western side, our park building on the western side of Sherman Park. You can get an idea what's going on there. And I've, of course, driven that one numerous times. It always pains me to see that park maintenance building. It almost looks like a complete shack on the back side of that big parking lot. There's the restroom. Sherman as well, backside. That doesn't look.
Actually, that's the front side.
Oh, sorry.
Academy.
Yeah, okay, sorry, thank you. There's some of the fencing we talk about. Doesn't look like an ideal secure setting to me. Like I said, we don't need any expensive fencing, if you will, for lack of a better way to say it, just secure fencing. That's sublet in the 10th ward, and you get a good
That's the
picture of some.
metal roof deck.
Okay, thank you. Here's some fencing at Wilmore. That, I would say that's kind of embarrassing to have that look at a park fence. Looks like something I'd try to do at my own house because I'm not very talented, but that shouldn't be the look. Restroom at Wilmore, pretty ancient.
Yeah, it's original.
That's obviously self-explanatory. That's our park maintenance building back by River to Pear, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And those are our zones. I think that concludes the pictures. I can, for sake of breath, we can stop, or I can go into Soulard and wrap it up, whatever works for you, Paul.
Well, let's take a look at some of the questions first, and then we'll go to.
Sure.
Let's see here.
Okay, are we going to have these slides emailed to us? Paul, do you?
Yeah, we post everything on the website. So you will have any material that's presented this evening, it will be posted on the website.
And I see Mr. Grant asked about Tower Grove. Tower Grove is funded privately, but they've been included in the city budget for many years. I don't know how many. I know it's about 700,000, right, Paul? And we also, it is a city park. It is just managed by Tower Grove and their own staff. We handle the perimeter trees, and we'll assist them, if you will. If there's ever a major storm, we can help them out. Kind of some reciprocity there. But Tower Grove has had funds directed toward it. I don't know if Paul, you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, that it is again, yeah, Greg, you're correct. The city subsidizes in its annual budget about $750,000 a year. Tower Grove is also, being a major park, gets a share of the half-cent sales tax for improvements. And the question being, are we going to also subsidize or going over and above with capital? Well, all of these requests are over and above the regular capital. So when we issued a request, for any overall capital requests from departments, these are some of the things we received to Tower Grove, but it's something for consideration. It's not necessarily funded or not, but it is something to consider.
Thank you.
Okay.
I hope that, yeah.
And Leroy had a follow-up question about the roofs.
So I can take that one. We would work with Kim and her staff to identify what the best fit is. Many times, what we've done with these parks buildings are, we have used standing seam type metal roofs if they are the best fit. We have used some EPDM type membrane roofs over the years, or built up roofing systems, but in general, we look at what the application is. You know, does it have to be somewhat architectural? Does it have to just be functional? And we work with Kim and her staff. And also, I will say this to you, 99.9% of the time, neither Parks or the Board of Public Service has architectural staff on board to design roofs. So we have a consultant on call that we've selected. And so we have typically a registered professional architect recommend to us what the best fit is in that scenario. Kim, anything further?
Yeah, the other consideration is cultural resources.
Yes, correct.
I saw one other question, which might actually ended up being, okay, this is from Christy. How much money actually ended up being allocated from the last year for these things? Let me pull that one up real quick.
So I can get that one too, Paul. For this particular item, which was $10 million, it was recommended by the previous Citizen Advisory Committee and then it went to the capital committee. And between the capital committee, the Board of E&A and the Board of Aldermen, this item was not funded with any dollars from Board Bill 184. So
Yeah,
this is still the same item as the last time. That's why we're revisiting it, because it's extremely important.
Yeah, I just pulled up on screen so you could see it. These were the items that were funded, of the items that Greg had spoke of. The part of the boilers, one of the pool renovations, the rec center roofs, and we also had some tree removal funds allocated.
Definitely familiar with that page and those numbers. I have it near me too, obviously for the meeting. So I don't want to punt to Kim on this, but I need to, because we're very excited. The Cabaney House, Mr. Grant asked about the upgrades to it. We've had the Cabaney House, as you probably know, is at Union and Lendell on the north side of Forest Park. It has had a lot of needs over the years, and it's a great place to rent out for parties, but it hasn't been conducive to that. So Kim, you want to touch upon some fantastic news of getting that back to a revenue source, and more importantly, really, or equally important, a place that folks can rent out and use. To Cabaney, what's just some of the last year and a half, 2 years, what we've done over there and what we continue to do?
So we worked in conjunction with Forest Park Forever. And again, we treated Cabaney House kind of the same way we're treating these park yards, is to get them, waterproofed and weathertight so that, we don't lose the structure completely. If we don't save them now, it just costs more down the line. It's a bigger ticket. So at Cabaney House, Forest Park Forever invested in all of the roof. It went back to, it was a tile roof and historical, so it went back. They went back with the copper gutters, and then we worked with them along with their outside contractor on the soffit and fascia. We, our carpenters, totally remade the front porch rails that were completely rotted, and they did those. And then we had hired a plastering company to come in and repair the plaster in the building where the roof had leaked, had fallen through and caused the ceilings to collapse in 3 of the rooms. So we're at that stage where the next stage will be looking at the windows, and it will again be a partnership between the Parks Department and Forest Park Forever. Because Forest Park is a regional park, we do get some of that those tax dollars, but the bulk of the work has come from Forest Park Forever at this point. But there's still a lot of stuff to do in there. There's floors, it needs to be painted. Some of that stuff we're able to do ourselves, which we're going to look at doing over the winter. That's winter work for the painters. So we just keep plucking away at it a little bit at a time, which, with the park yards, it's kind of the same way. We need this influx of money to take care of the buildings, to bring them back. There's still things that have to be done to the interiors of the building. Something that we were looking at mostly the outside, but the electrical panels in these buildings are a hazard. We're going to new, time clocks with the city. None of my staff have the capability to have computers because they don't have internet and things like that. So in addition, if I can take care of the building itself with this influx and just get them structurally watertight, safe, then I think with the tax money that we get from the Metro tax and neighborhood parks money. This other stuff would be an investment. My goal is to put away money every year from those funds and set aside money to keep up. Somebody just asked about preventative maintenance. So, you know, we're always doing, we do the playgrounds and we do, you know, the comfort stations and we do the spray pads and things like that. And that's all well and good, but there has to be some money set aside out of those funds to do yearly maintenance. So we don't end up in this situation again, you know, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Great, well said. And I think you answered the chat question. I hope you answered the gentleman's chat question and the other one that was in the Q&A about will these improvements have future maintenance funding? I think you answered that with those sources of taxes that we receive.
So Paul, I think there's a question from Ms. Shackelford about, have you, Greg, have you guys received any land water conservation grants in the past 7 years, specifically outdoor recreation, legacy partnership type grants?
We've received one when we redid aviation fields in Forest Park. Forest Park Forever helped us write that grant application, and that grant that we received helped us with the rest of the lights, ball field lights for the fields. At the time, we only had 2 out of the 6 fields that were lit. And now with that help of that grant, we were able to do the other 4 fields. So yes, we did get one. And I think that was in like 2018 or 19.
Right, that's about right. And that's just like the other questions. That's a great question. And I think was also great with that project with the lighting and lighting all those fields was I believe there was a significant Ameren rebate involved with that since we switched to LED.
Yes.
So that was a great question.
So Paul, Kate just asked another question about, are these improvements competing for funds against other capital needs? Or is there a certain amount of money for each department? And I'll start that conversation, and Paul, you can jump in here. So when we put the capital needs list together, it's by critical needs, as we've stressed in the first couple meetings here. But at the end of the day, there's always a certain limited pot of capital funding that we're going to get. So I think what always happens is, and in this particular case, other critical needs in other departments and in parks overtook this one. And so that's why it didn't get any funding on Board Bill 184. So it's a little bit of a combination of both, because I think that we do try hard to make sure that each department gets their most critical needs addressed. But in some cases where you have other very critical needs that could come up, and the Capital Committee or the Board of E&A or the Board of Aldermen feel they're more important, they take precedence over everything. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. That's true. It's sort of a combination. As Kim mentioned, there are dedicated sources, capital funding sources for parks. We do have the 50-cent sales tax, of which the regional parks get 17% and recreation centers get 3%. And we also have the Metro Park sales taxes. There's 2 of them. One's a 10-cent and one's a 3/16 cent. Of the 10 cent, the city receives 50% and the rest goes to the Metro Parks District. And of the 3/16 cent, the city receives 40% and the rest goes to the Metro Parks District. And that was discussed in that capital budget guide, which is also posted online that we reviewed last week. If you look in there, that sort of details that. So, but over and above that are these other requests that just simply are not being able to be met by the various funding, other sources. So as Kim mentioned, they would like to see some allocation of funds, and then they would be able to, going forward, hopefully getting caught up, be able to maintain them using portion of those other dedicated sources. So to some extent, yeah, that is a trade-off. And basically as any, because you're looking at a available pie of capital funds, you will be weighing priorities, say, okay, do I have $1 million or $2 million for this parks project as opposed to $2 million for our paving project or bridge project? So the idea, and I always tell people when we're talking about budgets, is that it's always, you always want to just see the whole picture first before making the allocation, because that gives you an idea about how to weigh those priorities. So that's why we present it all at once, because I can guarantee you parks can make great case for the funding they need, as well as streets you're going to hear from next week as well. And you're going to hear some of those, that long list of capital needs out there. And it's sort of the charge of the committee as well as the capital committee to sort of assess based on the amount of funds we have to make those priorities and make those recommendations to our elected officials.
And I would like to piggyback on what Paul said about, we do get that outside or that tax funding, but we also, since I've been here, have allocated money, some of that money towards equipment purchases. So, and then daily things are happening within the parks, whether it's like Lafayette Park. I have 3 water main breaks in the park alone. I have water main breaks at Beckett Park and, half a dozen parks. So yes, we do get that money. And yes, we are replacing playgrounds and things like that. But there are literally day-to-day things that come up. I have a stack here in front of me of things that need to be done. Light poles have fallen over at Penrose Park and Lions Park because they're so old. This is ball field lighting. So, those are things that we're not counting on that come out of that, also come out of that tax money. So I will say, and I hope Paul agrees with this, I've been spending a lot of money of that money to try to bring these things, try to get things under control, try to, right now we work on a broke fix mentality. And that's something that eventually we get away from, so that we have preventative maintenance and not just waiting for something to break and then it's an issue.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Yeah, I'm going to bring you back to the needs inventory for parks. And one of the other items on the list, which was a bigger item, which was the Soulard Market renovations. That was a $7 million item. It's going to be a little higher than that. I had asked, in seeing that number, again, it was on last year's list, it's on this year's list. I did want Greg and Kim to discuss that a little bit more in detail and give us a breakdown. So they have provided such. Let me see if I can get those files up on screen here. Let's see. I have it. Let's see if I got it.
Paul, that file that you post, that'll include the pictures of the pools and the boiler updates, correct?
It's whatever came with the Soulard Market pictures.
Okay.
Is you not want to do Soulard now?
Yeah, no, however you want to do it is fine. I don't know what.
Oh, I see.
There we go.
You had other things you wanted to talk about before going to Soulard?
Can I just run through them real
Oh,
quick?
yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. Kim, you had some updated, and this also ties into that question. I think Christy asked about some of the updates related to some of the funding we received this year. And I see this updated here. And so, yeah, why don't you take us through that, Kim? I'm sorry.
Okay. Just real quick. As you see, it says BB 184. That's from Board Bill 184 that we got. It was a couple $1 million to do the boilers. So I've lined through the boilers that were taken care of under that board bill, but as you can see, there's other ones on here. This was done at a separate time, so the Soulard Market one will actually be in the Soulard Market breakdown too. So you got a little bit of a crossover there. Then if you go down to, you can skip through the pictures, and those are just pictures of the old, what, okay, stop there. So this is a breakdown of the pools. And as you can see from this picture, if you go down just a little bit, yeah, you can see these are the pipes that are, the tunnels run underneath the pool decks. And from the chlorine and the years, I mean, these pools were built in the 1950s and 60s. So all of that piping is corroded, and it's been patched and patched and patched. Fairgrounds Park was one that was recently done. We had to remove all of the piping and do new. It got a new pool deck and new electrical. And this is actually Tandy Pool, but this is pretty indicative of all of the other pools. So if you go down a little farther, Paul, you'll see a breakdown, or maybe it's up. These are just other pictures of it, but that's kind of a breakdown of where that money would go that is on that capital ask. And then again, we have to start to pull in the YMCA pools and O'Fallon Park and Condolet Park, just because they are at the like 11, 12 and 14, 15-year-old age. So things are starting to break, go down, need to be replaced there also. So that's what that additional money is there below. So that's all I had.
Yeah, and I'm sure the committee knows, but just a reminder, even though Carondelet and O'Fallon are state-of-the-art facilities managed by the YMCA, they're still city buildings.
Okay, let's go back to Soulard. I'm just going to pull up the list, and then I know you have some pictures, so I'll start with the list and then we can jump to the pictures, I guess, if that works, Kim.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so I can lead off here. Kim, thanks for all your insight on the prior slides. So basically about a $7.5 million ask, if you will, of facility needs at Soulard. Soulard, I believe it's the oldest open air market, dates back to 1779, 730 Carroll Street, and the Grand Hall was built in 1929. So it gives you a pretty good historical frame of reference of how old this facility is. And you'll see some of the notations that it essentially they're original to the building. You know, I'll just hit some of the highlights. We have 148 vendor stands, and we have about 100 vendors. We're nearly 100% occupancy with no vacancy, and we're always looking for more diverse vendors, more farmers, more diverse products, if you will, et cetera. And so just some of the highlights, and anybody can walk into Soulard, as I'm sure you have in the past. The boilers, you're talking, you know, $750,000 in needs, and we'll get to those very descriptive pictures. The electrical and the lighting is very poor there. You're talking about $350,000. You go down to roof replacement. Kim has noted that the main building's been patched, but certainly not to the level of what we would need to do a roof replacement, and close to $1 million on the roof replacement of the wings. Tuck pointing, new windows, of course, sizable cost there. Definitely you see chipped paint all over the facility. We'll show you a few pictures, basic pictures of the restrooms. Now, when you drive by Soulard and you see those big tarps flapping, those are the response, and they are an eyesore. They are the responsibility of each vendor in their vendor lease with us. So we've sent out a recent letter to them that there's a need for them to replace them where they, if they haven't already. And of course, street, going down the list a little further, we have door problems and street paving needs on Julia. And I see that heaters for exterior stalls is there. That certainly would be advantageous to the vendors there. Some of these we could quibble over what's more important as a priority than others. But at the end of the day, we don't feel $7.5 million is an unreasonable number. And the last frame of reference, I'll let you know, back in 2012, prior to my tenure, there was a master plan done for Soulard Market. Paul and Rich and even Kim, who hasn't been here as long in this department, may be familiar. But I recall that figure back in 2012 for an initial phase, medium-term phase, and long-term phase. The total price tag was about, I believe it was right just shy of 15 million. That was 10 years ago. So it gives you an idea of the needs, and we can get into some of the pictures.
Okay, let's see if I can find that.
There's just a,
They're attached. I thought. Oh, okay.
it is a need of a lot, and we want to remain as a city. I contend we want to remain in the farmers market business. We're proud to have that. It's an iconic location. These are affordable price foods and products for folks. And it's not, I would contend it's also not high price products. There's some real quality there, good diversity, variety. So we want to remain in the market business, but this facility needs help. Yeah, that's just showing you a structural layout, if you will, of the vendors, and we've redacted the names. You didn't feel we needed to put vendor names in there, but that's what Soulard looks like if you walk through it just schematically. So we can go to the pictures. As you can see, just looking at some of these fixtures, the lighting is very poor in Soulard. I don't even know Kim and her team that work at Soulard to troubleshoot problems, and Rich's team, of course. The fixtures are just, I'd call them no uniformity whatsoever, just patchwork and very substandard lighting. And lighting is very important, as you know, not only to run a business, but it gives folks a nice sense of security and a real sense of security to have adequate illumination. And it's definitely inadequate there. Drains, yes, we do have problems with drains around the perimeter of the building and the interior of the building. That's a little tough to see, but we do have drainage. Thank you. We do have storm drain and gutter issues, gutter pipes that definitely need to be not repaired, but replaced. Major painting needs in the facility throughout. You see a lot of rust on the beams. You see it just needs to have a better look. It's deserving, in my opinion, of a better look than what it looks like for something that's been around since 1929 with little to no funding toward it. Plumbing, Kim, I'm not chuckling about the facility, but how often do you have one or two plumbers on our park staff? How often are you, and I'm not setting you up, you already know, but how often are your plumbers just trying to do patchwork? They're major plumbing needs, right? $500,000 probably.
We try to spend usually one day a week, or at least a half a day, just at Soulard when the market is closed. These piping issues over the years, vendors have tapped in. Sometimes they're in the unheated areas. You know, you can see how it's kind of, I call it rigged. So yeah, they're down there every week doing something, whether it's lighting, plumbing, the doors, the locks, the restrooms. It's just because the building is so old. It's such a cool building, all those windows and doors you see, those are all original to the building, so it's really a magnificent building. It's just that it needs, the electric's been tapped into, you know,
Kim, let me,
100 times, so it's just, it needs some love.
yeah, let me ask you that. What is that? What are these? What are the pipes that we're looking at? And what is that supplying?
That's supplying water to
Right.
the stands. And then in some situations, it may be a sink where they're washing off fruit or something, and then the water just drains out to the ground. So, yeah, so the individual tenants over the years have tried to make do with what was there.
Okay, so each
Right.
stand has a water source of some sort?
Not all of them do, no.
Right.
No, these are just a few that do.
And Kim and I have, this is no discredit to the past, but Kim and I have noted, well, her team who actually, her trades folks, when they go there, there'll be times when they'll note something at a stand and say, what is this? Well, modifications were made to certain, sometimes mostly basic, but modifications were made where we weren't even aware of what the vendor's trying to do to improve their stand situation. Now, we always tell folks they need to go to the building division, and vendors do, but prior to our tenure, we come into a few things, no hazards per se, but just, we didn't know this was here, Yeah, these just break down into the halls, the plumbing issues. Similar to some of the same, like I said, it'd be great to see more uniformity. We have some great vendors. Somebody, just to answer the question, somebody asked how many people are at Soulard a year. We estimate on our biggest day, which is Wednesdays, are pretty light. Thursdays fairly light. Friday picks up. Saturdays, we estimate that we get about 10,000 vendors. It's tough to track folks because they can come in all directions into the market. It's not one entrance or exit. So they come from all over the wings, but we average about 10,000 folks every Saturday. So there's at least 100 that, you can take it times 12, and that's what we average just on Saturdays alone. And we're obviously open 52 weeks a year. Yes, I hope that helped answer that. But we're at least 10,000 on a Saturday, as we estimate every Saturday. $52 weeks a year. I'm not sure what this is offhand. I'm sorry. I know it's a wing. Oh, okay. Southwest wing. Okay, you can see just some of the needs. I mean, the beams, and here's some of the most descriptive pictures. These are the boilers that are original to the building. So what's that? Almost 100 years, 90 plus years. And we have a real concern when something's going wrong here, because I would think you'd agree we can only band-aid infrastructure and facilities like this so many times. These need replaced if we want to stay in the market business. Here's the restrooms. Personally, I don't think the restrooms are that bad myself, but once you start looking at these pictures, they definitely need some help, and they're similar to some of the park maintenance yard pictures you've seen. But Kim, this restroom isn't the one right in the Grand Hall, right? I think in the Grand, I'm sorry.
I don't think so.
Right. So, yeah, this may be, I'm sorry, folks, this may be a little dated picture or something's escaping me here. But if you've been to Soulard, the restrooms definitely could use some help. Yeah, I don't believe that's the main one next to our disabled accessible restroom, if you will. So, but that's in the building. That one's just escaping me. I can get an answer for you later. Just some of the door issues. I mean, different doors all over the place, but it'd be nice to see a little more uniformity. Okay, that's the door on the restroom in the grand hall in the bottom left, yes. But the restrooms are not up to par. I've just seen worse. Kim, you want to talk about any electrical issues? Those pictures are pretty self-explanatory of,
Yeah, that one reminds me of Christmas Vacation when he's trying to get his lights. And the lighting is run in metal conduit, and that metal conduit, you could kind of see it in some of the other pictures, is starting to rust through, and that bottom right hand one is just, yeah, that's just scary all by itself. So as you can see, they're still using the round fuses. They don't even have circuit panels. Yeah, this is
right. I think there are 3 related questions about, is there a method or appetite to create a community campaign to fundraise? Somebody asked about private funding. Those two, actually, there's 2 that go together. When I first started here about 8 years ago, about 2 years in, I was approached by a large corporation in the city, and they wanted to help out possibly a public-private partnership. I was enthused, our team was enthused to have those conversations where we still own the building, but maybe it's privately managed, and that corporation and perhaps other corporations that not only the city and the region would possibly team up and join a large team, if you will, from the corporate, I can't even think of what I was trying to say, from the corporate world, if you will. And we had a few great presentations from them, and there was interest. And then a couple of those individuals left the firm and it went away. But to answer your question, it would be great to fundraise for Soulard if in fact we can't get all the funding to do what we need to do down there to give it what it needs, to make it safe, presentable, and much more popular for prospective vendors, if you will. So yes, we are not averse to those thought processes, and we're also not averse if it really turned into a much better facility to possibly have a private partner to help not only with the funding and helping to make improvements, but also possibly to run it. We have essentially a 3-person staff there. We have a per performance market manager, an individual that doesn't even get benefits, and he's there 4 days a week, and we have 2 custodians. That is the extent of our staffing level at Soulard. They do a good job, but that is where we are. And also, where does the revenue from the vendor leases go? It goes straight into general revenue with the city of St. Louis.
Yeah, I'll add on that, Greg. It's about 200, last year it was $245,000, which is a little low because I guess the pandemic was affected that. It's usually running between 250, 260, something like that. The operating budget, by the way, which is also out of general revenue, is and I'm looking up for that number right now, is
like 280.
Yeah, well, actually this year it's about 310.
Okay.
So revenue had been getting close. I think it took a little hit with the pandemic. So it's so the way it's been budgeted is pretty close to where the revenue would be sufficient to offset at least the budget amount in the general revenue.
Right. I know there was, I don't have it in front of me, but I think there were some years, obviously, we were in the black, so to speak. Yeah, it pretty much funds itself, if you will. But we are not, like I said, we are open to any. We have not, to answer a question that was posed, no, we have not done a community campaign for private fundraising. We have not to date, but it's certainly a great idea. Oh, sorry, I was muted. These are some of the tarps I was referring to that are vendor responsibilities. But the back of house, if you will, at some of these stands looks pretty rough. The concrete's broken up where they are allowed to park one of their vehicles or two of their vehicles or some of their supply trailers. You don't really see it in these pictures, but trust me, there's definitely some needs back there where they're driving and parking. And it's just not a presentable facility, but if someone asks me, I'm a city employee, I know that, but if someone asks me, where's my favorite market, farmer's market in the region, unquestionably it's Soulard. It's my favorite. Anybody goes down there on a Saturday, I think would see how many people love to go there. It's just a phenomenal, it's like Kim said, I don't know the adjective you use, but it's just a cool place. It's really, there's the sign. Actually, the Soulard Business Association was broaching the possibility of replacing that sign, and we said, sure. So I don't know where that is now because we haven't heard back from them, but they're a real help down there in Soulard, the SBA. And Mardi Gras, of course. Mardi Gras Inc. is our partner on their big event, and they help with Soulard whenever they have funding to help out to make some neat. They did cameras a few years ago. Yeah, so there's some of the stands. Yeah, and we have some empty stands. They're getting paid for, but we want to tell the folks, use them or lose them because we have some prospective vendors. So we do have interest in the market. It's not like we're losing folks and not replacing them. We want a full house. Yeah, well, there's some interior and exterior pavement issues I was referring to, cracked walks, cracked. Yeah, those are self-explanatory. And that's what I have on Soulard. Hopefully I didn't go into too much detail here.
All right, thanks, Greg. Did we? Okay, there's another question from Katie. Would the market have to pause for renovations?
I'm not an engineer. I wouldn't lead that effort, but I will take a chance at getting this right. I would say you'd obviously work on a wing, and maybe we could shift those vendors when one wing was getting worked on, shift those vendors, some of the empty stands that are leased, and work that out. But I don't think you would need to suspend market operations and shut the facility down. Maybe there's some issues if you did a roof repair for safety and you got a new roof in, but Kim and Rich and Kim may have a little more insight, but I think you could do it piecemeal based upon funding.
I think I would say, we would hire a consultant. Again, we would work with Parks and the market, look at the schedule, see what the least busy times of the year are for the areas that we're going to renovate. We do phased renovations to least impact the market operation and the revenue. That'd be my take. Kim?
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, the market's closed on Mondays and Tuesdays too. So, you know, you could get the integral work that, you know, if it's a power shutdown or things like that, you know, it can be coordinated through what Rich is referring to.
Great points. And if we're talking about a slower, or it's always active, but if a slower or less customer time frame, you're basically talking November through February. Actually, I'd say December. We get quite a bit of traffic in November because you have some nice days. I'd say that 90 days of December, January, February, it's certainly slower there.
All right. Was that pretty much what you had for us tonight, Greg?
Yes, unless Kim, is that what you had as well with?
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
Yeah, that should conclude Soulard and the other needs.
Great, thank you. So just to members of the committee, so you've seen pretty much what Parks has requested. I would suggest if you have any other inquiries about Parks in general or these particular projects in particular, just reach out and we'll try to get more information for you, or just we can discuss further at an additional meeting. Next week, what we'd like to go into, we've got scheduled to talk about streets, which includes some of the bridge projects and arterial paving. So we'll have the streets department here to discuss what they're looking at and how they prioritize arterial paving. So so we look forward to that meeting, and we can discuss that in more detail. But unless there's anything else for the common good of the group, I think that's all we have for this evening.
Excuse me, Paul, I didn't mean to walk on you. I just want to take the opportunity to thank the Citizens Advisory Committee, you, Paul, Rich Bradley, Kim, and everybody on the committee. We tried to be informative, and hopefully we reach fruition with some of these funds to do what we'd like to do. And we appreciate your attention and insight, especially some of these all the questions that were posed.
Well, thank you, Greg, for putting this stuff together, because I know it's an exhaustive list, and I know that the funds always are never enough to cover everything that we need. But hopefully, just this, particularly with the pictures, I think it gives an idea. It's easy to talk about these things just in theory, but when you see some of the pictures, it brings it home to what actually the needs are. And hopefully, as I mentioned to the Citizens Advisory Committee, in general, you like to be able to sort of ruminate on some of these things. And as you see the other departments present, then you can present this in terms of the total picture and what the priorities in each of your minds would be in order to determine where we should allocate the monies. So again, thank you guys, Kim and Greg, and thank you all to the committee. And we'll be seeing you. Next week, same time, 5:30, and we'll be talking about streets. Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good night.